I mean, I look at my daughter, who's 35, has less rights and autonomy than I did at her age because of the changes that have been made at the government level. I think I've finally gotten to a point where I'm comfortable with who I am and what I do. And it's interesting because I think that people around me are much more comfortable with my decisions, even though I second guess them. And when someone comes back and say, because of you, I did this, or I had this opportunity, I know that I've made the right decisions and I've done what's in the best interest.
Tell me, Janice, how do you want to be remembered, not as a mayor or an activist, but as a human being?
That I cared and that I did all I could to drive positive change.
Hello and welcome to Ego Was Here. Today I'm joined by Janice Kovach, mayor and women's advocate, who has spent years challenging power, silence, and the systems that shape our lives. Hello, Janice.
Hello.
I'm so glad to have you here.
Oh, it's an honor to be here. I appreciate the invite. I love having conversations with other women that really understand what we're dealing with.
So, Janice, you once returned to college as a single parent.
Yes.
What was that experience like, and what did it teach you about resilience?
It was an interesting experience. I didn't know how I was going to be able to navigate. And what was great about the program is they dealt with adults who were coming back into the education system. I wasn't in there with others, recent high school graduates. And I think what was interesting is I learned for myself how to really manage my time and
Yes.
give what I needed to both my program as well as my daughter.
Yeah. How do you navigate the tension between the person people expect you to be and the person you truly are?
I don't know that there is much of a difference anymore. I'm at a point in my life
After so many years, huh?
right? What you see is what you get.
Yes.
I think I recognize that when people are approaching, they're approaching because of an issue or a question, um, not to me personally, but to what I bring to the table.
And has there ever been a moment where your role as a leader clashed with your inner values?
Yes. And it wasn't that long ago. As a mayor, I take an oath of office that I represent everyone. I uphold the Constitution. And in 2020, we dealt with, obviously, not just us, but many communities dealt with Black Lives Matter and individuals who are, rebelling against the system. And we had a
Yes.
march in our community. And it was interesting, and I look at it now, at the time it was stressful, but there were individuals who took the opportunity to try and make it about them and not about the movement. And, this is where I struggle because my social values, my personal values are, I believe in the need to be supportive of those who've been underserved.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have had residents who were on the opposite side of that. So it was probably a good month to 2 months of a lot of soul searching for myself. and understanding kind of where I fit in this narrative, and how could I stay true to my values but still represent in the role that I was. And that's where I think I learned to compartmentalize, where my role as a mayor was different than my role as Janice.
Of course. So did you ever feel that you had to hide parts of yourself in order, to protect yourself, to survive in leadership?
I don't know so much it's hiding as in not sharing my personal feelings. I try to keep
Yes.
to issues that were representative, you know. And if someone asked me, I was truly honest with who I was and what my beliefs were, but I didn't put it out there in a public way to make people uncomfortable.
Janice, are there moments you've doubted your own ability to create change?
Ah, it's one of those things where you have to take the time and stop and think through what it is you want to do. Um, I know what's important to me and what change I want to see happen. And I know not everyone agrees with all of that. And there are times when I will second guess, but I really try to be thoughtful in my approach and listen to all sides of a conversation or a discussion. Um, it's taken time, but I think I've finally gotten to a point where I'm comfortable with who I am and what I do. And it's interesting because I think that people around me are much more comfortable with my decisions, even though I second guess them.
And how do you measure your impact? Is it by legislation, personal stories, or the quiet moments that no one sees?
I think it's a little bit of everything. Legislatively, locally, it's we don't make major differences. Um, I advocate based on my community and other communities with the legislature and the governor's office. I think every once in a while, getting that thank you from someone, public service, it's interesting. I come from the corporate world, so you never really saw the impact of what you did. Public service, you actually see how you can change someone's life. And when someone comes back, days, months, years later and say, because of you, I did this or I had this opportunity, I know that I've made the right decisions and I've done what's in the best interest.
And what experience in politics has shaken you the most on a personal level?
On a personal, I think it was during 2020. I think that was the biggest emotional as well as physical struggles that we dealt with. You I had a community that was trying to understand, and we were going I mean, we're changing daily. It, Local government was operating in the 1700s. We had to move to the 1900s in a matter of hours. You know, we everything was always done face to face, and now we needed to be able to navigate. We also needed to
Yes.
help our business community continue so that they would be able to stay open or operate once we had gotten through whatever the pandemic was bringing us.
Hmm. I wonder, is there a right way to create culture change? Or do you think every act big or small, carries meaning?
I think every act carries meaning. You know, and I'll go back. The pandemic really was an opportunity for so many, right? We had come from an environment where we were constantly going, going, going. And now all of a sudden we were forced to stop and kind of regroup with our families, you know.
Hmm.
And I liken it to the movie The Matrix when Neo takes the either the blue pill or the red pill, right? The blue pill, you go
Yes.
back in the matrix and you go back to what life was. But the red pill gives you the opportunity to drive the change that you need to see and that reset that needs to happen. And I think we saw that. I mean, I think we've slid back a little bit, but it's something I keep always at the front of my mind that I know I need to make sure I focus on that.
Janice, tell me, what does empowerment mean to you beyond slogans or
Uh,
campaigns?
Empowerment is that willingness to take a chance, um, the ability to make a decision and know that you're doing it for the right reasons, and to accept that there may be mistakes made and that you need to kind of reshuffle or reset and then still move forward.
Yes. Yes. I saw your TEDx talk, and I mean, I was shocked. I really want to see the documentary on your diaries. Like, the honor system is
Yes.
used to control women in many
Yes.
societies, right? So,
Yes.
how do you personally confront systems that strip away choice and autonomy?
We're dealing with it now, right? I mean, I look at my daughter who's 35 has less rights and autonomy than I did at her age because of the changes that have been made at the government level. And I struggle with how anyone is okay with making a decision for someone else until you walk in the shoes and have to make a decision to do something. I don't think it's anyone else's right to do it. It's definitely not a man who can't get himself pregnant.
Tell me uh, because I want the listeners to know about this documentary
Yes.
and what they will experience
Yes.
once they see it.
So the documentary, I was connected with them about 12 years ago, and it is a group of women who are activists within their community. So it's dealing with forced marriage, it's dealing with child marriage, it's dealing with female genitalia mutilation,
Hmm.
and it's a powerful documentary. These are stories that these women share and how their lives change. And I'll use forced marriage as an example. So that becomes a family driven, and women are their value is is about who they marry, and the
Yes.
parents and are willing to murder their children if they don't do what's expected. Um, the one woman who's in there, she tells the story of her sister who was in a forced marriage and ultimately um, committed suicide by burning herself because she couldn't stay in this abusive relationship anymore. And her family wouldn't support her to leave her husband because it would have been considered, um, an affront to the family.
It's unbelievable.
And it still
Unbelievable.
happens today, right? Like even in the United States, like
Of course.
even there
Of
are
course.
individuals who are forced to marry based on their culture.
How can women reclaim space in cultures or institutions that have long silenced them?
I think it is a willingness to go outside your comfort zone, to stand up, to and to really be there, whether for themselves or someone else. You know, there are women who don't have a voice. I
Yes.
mean, how many times we hear about women who are in domestic violence situations and their partner is the one protected, not them.
Yes. If you had a moment with every girl in the world, what would you tell them about power, freedom, and self-worth?
I I'll tell you what I tell my daughter, and that is no one defines her value or her self-worth other than she herself. She I want her to understand that there are not barriers, or there should not be barriers to her being who she wants to be. And, you know, I can say that now as, you know, at the age that I'm at. I wish I could have in my 20s projected that more.
Yes. You know, I think that in a way, we as women, we are, I don't know, we have those beliefs, that are rooted in us.
Yes.
We always have to only care for the children and try to keep quiet, Um, we always try to balance things. And I think that we leave ourselves behind.
Yes. All the time.
For me, because
All the time.
I've been a victim of abuse. What I understand is that, nobody talks about how fear can trap you in a
Yes.
way that,
Yes.
you're afraid to speak. You don't
Hmm.
know who to speak to, because if you
Hmm.
speak to your family, you're afraid for them. You're trying to protect them by not speaking, because you know
Yes.
that they will react, but
Yes.
you don't know what's coming when they will react. And I mean, it's really hard. I've heard many people say, "Oh, you were in an abusive relationship. Why didn't you just leave?" Well, it's not that simple,
No.
because fear paralyzes you.
No. And it's not just the fear, it's also that the abuse is an emotional, right? You get to a point where you are either dependent or you are not um, comfortable in decisions you make because you have been beaten down so
Hmm.
frequently, not physically, but emotionally. And those scars don't go
Yes.
away. My first marriage, you know, I see it now, but I was in an abusive relationship. He alienated me from my family. He he kept the money so that I had no access to funds. And it wasn't until I was literally on the verge of a nervous breakdown that I recognized I was in a bad place and I needed to leave.
Janice, don't you think that many women might be in an abusive marriage relationship and not be aware of it?
Yes, because when it's emotional, it is a slow process and you don't recognize it. And until you get to a point where you have no self-worth.
Exactly. What do you feel is missing in the public dialogue around women, power, and violence? Like, what truths are often left untouched?
We don't listen when we hear a conversation that's taking place or we're watching something that's taking place. You know, when someone jokes and says, "Oh, her husband is just, having fun. He doesn't mean it. Um, those are the situations that are the most dangerous because we're allowing that to continue and we're not doing anything to help change the narrative or the paradigm for that individual.
Of course. Now, how has serving others changed how you see yourself?
Ugh, I love what I do. I, it's a job that's fulfilling and it's paying it forward. And, when I'm out in the neighborhood or the community knocking on doors and kids will, in the neighborhood will start saying, "Hey, Mayor, how are you?" Or "Hi, Mayor." And they're waving as they're going by. Um, you know, and to hear them talk about, "Oh, I remember when you came to my class in second grade."
Mm-hmm.
Those are really important moments because I know that there is something, that they'll remember, that they will have a positive experience with government or politics and
Mm-hmm.
and maybe give them the opportunity to think and, maybe become a public servant.
Yes. When you look back, what moments have surprised you the most, like moments of hope, courage, or connection?
So many. I've
Something
been
that
doing
really
this
stuck with you.
for 20 years now. So it is when an employee comes up and just says thank you. Um, I try every year to bring lunch for our employees around the holidays. It's a small gesture, but it's just to let them know that I appreciate all that they do. And when they say thank you, it- they mean it. Um, when I have been out advocating, whether it's for my community or another community with the legislature, you know, testifying in front of the legislature to say, this is why this is important. And
Mm-hmm.
then to see the legislation move. I think every
Yes.
ribbon cutting we've ever done for our small business community and every wedding that I've performed are all the memories that I will always have and talk about.
Yeah. So you co-founded the River Town Festival. How did
Yes.
that idea come to life, and what did you hope it would achieve?
So it was interesting. My partner for the festival comes from the entertainment space, and it was beginning of 2017, and we had just had obviously the election, and there was a lot of angst about what was going to happen, and we were talking. And what's interesting is film brings people together from both sides, right? It
Of course.
because you can get lost in the story, and we made the festival about community, and it was broad enough that we could have films from all different genres, from whether it was a horror movie or a documentary or a short. um they were all about bringing community together, and we did with all volunteers. Everyone that was part of it did it because they either loved film or they wanted to volunteer and experience it.
So, what draws you personally to art as a tool for advocacy and social impact?
I like the stories. I think you can have an impact when you tell it through a story, through a narrative, when you see something through someone else's eyes. And even to be able to escape reality at times. The fantasy of I'm a huge Disney fanatic. So I watch all the Disney movies. For me, that's that I get to be a kid again. It reminds me of what, my childhood was like and what was important to me at that time. And I think we sometimes lose the from when we were kids and, that experience and that excitement. And I think film tells not just the story, but gives us an outlet.
Yes. In a way, art can reach places where politics
Absolutely.
sometimes can't. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think art has a way of connecting people
It does,
in a
because there's
magical
not
way.
a threat.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yes. So tell me about Clinton.
So we are a small town, 1.3 square miles. There's 2,700 residents. We The town was established back in the late 1700s, officially became a town in 1865. We look like middle America. Our main street is a bunch of buildings that are built anywhere from the late 1800s to the early 1900s. We have a river that runs through the town, and on both sides of the river, I have the Red Mill, which is the most photographed location in the state. And then on the other side, I have another museum, which is our Hundred Art Museum. And we're a community that loves to host events. We love a good party.
That's so nice.
It is. We love inviting people in.
So,
We love parades.
so what do you hope for the future?
What I would like to see is a dialogue between both sides, a willingness to work across party lines for what's in the best interest of our constituents and our communities, not of a political initiative. That we could have conversations with our neighbors, even when we disagree. What I feel is there's so much disconnect and an unwillingness to even have a conversation because of the attacks that come. When I see all the social media, I call them armchair warriors. You know, it takes
Yes.
everything in me to not want to respond, but I can't become part of that problem.
Tell me your opinion on social media.
It has its there's good pieces of it. There's a way to communicate information quickly. The unfortunate side of it is the algorithms that feed into um, a narrative or a fear and send people down rabbit holes. You could post something completely innocuous and there will be 100 comments that are so negative and an attack that I'm not quite sure why, but it people feel it's okay to say whatever they want.
Exactly. Exactly. Tell me, Janice, how do you want to be remembered, not as a mayor or an activist, but as a human being?
That I cared and that I did all I could to drive positive change, whether in my community or for an individual, for my family.
So, Janice, thank you so much for
Thank you.
being here on Ego Was Here. It was truly an honor. And to all of you out there, remember, Ego was here, you're here, and that's enough.